Welcome to our Friday live stream This Week in Cannabis News, powered by Dutchie. Each Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, we deliver an overview of this week's cannabis news. It's quick, it's comprehensive, and it sends you into the weekend as a more informed cannabis professional, and it's all made possible by our friends at Dutchie. You can find and connect with the team there through a link in the show notes. And following today's rundown of the news, we'll share a conversation Jeremy and I had with Chris Emerson, the founder and CEO of Level, a California-based brand with a long history in the California market and now in a growing number of states as well. So stay tuned for that. It's a great conversation. Now, let's get to it. It looks like Pennsylvania may have a bipartisan solution to its long-running legalization stalemate. Recall that Democrats are largely in favor of legalizing cannabis in the Keystone State, but Republicans hold a slim 27 to 23 majority in the Senate, which means at least some bipartisan support is necessary to pass bills. Republican Senator Dan Laughlin introduced SB 120 in June, along with 4 Democratic co-sponsors. The bill established a cannabis control board, sets a 14% total tax rate, and will allow private businesses to be licensed as dispensaries. And here's why it matters. Pennsylvania has over 13 million residents, and its medical cannabis program pulled in $1.7 billion in sales through 2024, according to state data. The state is surrounded by legal cannabis states, of course, Ohio, New York, New Jersey, and Maryland, and close by Delaware is poised to join that club next month, so this could be a very big deal. Dan Laughlin, for his part, said the bill is smart, fair, and realistic. It's time Pennsylvania joined the growing number of states that are getting cannabis policy right. To another big state, Florida. Florida's 724 dispensaries were left unable to sell cannabis for most of the day before a major 3-day holiday weekend after BioTrack, the state's track and trace software provider, appeared to suffer an outage. Some stores started accepting cash and manually tracking sales on paper, according to an employee at an Orlando dispensary who confirmed similar reports on social media. The system was back up the next day, allowing stores to sell again, but the outage likely dealt a blow to sales last week. And intoxicating hemp could still be on the federal chopping block, but it may have at least a 1-year reprieve. The Senate Appropriations Committee passed a spending bill that, much like its House counterpart, would close the so-called hemp loophole created by the 2018 Farm Bill by outright banning intoxicating hemp. The Senate version includes a 1-year pause before that ban goes into effect to allow the Senate to find a middle ground where not all hemp products face prohibition, just those with intoxicating effects. More on this story in Cultivated.news. Retired U.S. Representative Earl Blumenauer is a Democrat from Oregon. He was the founding co-chair of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, and he was a major backer of federal cannabis reform in the House, and now he is retired. Also, he says now that bipartisan support for cannabis reform is eroding in Congress as oxygen gets sucked by Trump's priorities. This week, he told Marijuana Moment, "I am deeply concerned with continued work on legalization and our progress. We've had a whole range of things that were set up. I'm more than a little concerned that it looks like we've lost some momentum." This week, our official insights partner, Lit Alert, continued to provide Cultivated readers with deep dives into local regional markets in New York. This week, it was the lower Hudson Valley, including Westchester, Putnam, and Rockland counties. Now, these counties are just north of New York City and represent a unique opportunity to connect with customers who purchase in their local market and then in the New York City boroughs on their way to and from work. Lit Alerts pulled the data in these counties to showcase which brands and retailers are finding success, as well as which category-specific details when compared to the rest of the state. Now, New York juggernauts like Heirloom, Jaunty, and Dank continue to show their dominance, while New York upstart Ruby Farms has found footing in this local market. As well, Rove continues to show their ability to rank in the top brand positions in the top local markets. Another interesting insight, as you'll see in this graph, while flower dominates in this market like in many, the average prices for both flower and pre-roll categories are 5% higher in this local market than the state average. And finally, one, we're going to call it fun thing, but on Tuesday, a number of pro-Trump influencers and political accounts on the social media site X posted suspiciously similar talking points supportive of rescheduling and other limited federal cannabis reform. Trumpworld, of course, is quite a cast of characters, but at least they all seem to be swimming in the right direction on this particular issue. The accounts include Gunther Eagleman, a pseudonym for David Friedman, who has 1.4 million followers on the platform, Alex Bruzewitz, a right-wing political commentator and Trump advisor who was instrumental in popularizing the widely debunked conspiracy theory that Haitian immigrants were eating people's pets in Ohio, Matt Gaetz, the disgraced former congressman who was Trump's original pick to lead the Justice Department before his candidacy sank in the Senate, as well as boxer and friend of Trump, Mike Tyson. Here's what Gunther Eagleman had to say. As a former police officer, I strongly support President Trump on wanting to reschedule marijuana from Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. You can see all of that story, obviously, on Cultivated.news. And that is it for this week in cannabis news. But stay tuned, because it's a pleasure to share a conversation my co-founder Jeremy and I had with Chris Emerson. That is his real name, unlike Gunther Eagleman, the founder and CEO of Level. Here's that. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Jay Rosenthal, the managing director of Cultivated. That on the other side is Jeremy Burke. He's our editor-in-chief. We have founded Cultivated. God, Jeremy, it's now been a pretty long time. I don't have to put an actual date on it. Today, we're joined by Chris Emerson. I'm going to say Chris Emerson, PhD, because I think that's going to come up. He is the founder and CEO of Level. Chris, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate you guys making an opportunity for me to join.
Well, it's great. We've come up with a little series over the past week or so of cannabis brand founders, which we like. From my knowledge, you're the only one with a PhD after their name, which is impressive as it is. But talk a bit about your background, how you got to Level and founded it, and then we'll get into sort of where we are today.
Okay. Yeah. PhD in small molecule chemistry. So, traditionally either go discover drugs, make drugs, or go teach the next generation of scientists. I was living in San Francisco doing a postdoc at Stanford. I was totally fed up with bench science. I didn't want to go into pharma. This was early 2012. San Francisco was on fire, like Uber's getting off the ground, Facebook, Meta, you name it. Always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but never understood how I was going to reconcile a very hard science like chemistry and regulatory oversight and how expensive it was with a startup. So didn't know what I was going to do, and ended up quit my postdoc through a series of serendipitous events. Ended up on a medical cannabis farm in Mendocino. I lived in a tent next to a trim yurt for 3 months in the redwoods and got a very quick, fast, and thorough indoctrination into what cannabis looked like in Prop 215 days. And although I had only been an occasional user of cannabis at that time, just being on the farm, I was completely inspired by the plant. I looked at it in a way I never had, and realized, look, there's hundreds of compounds this plant is making that we could probably leverage in different ways for unique effects or targeted effects. And that's where the thesis of Level really developed. Got back to San Francisco, worked as a chief chemist at a biotech, working on some real science fiction stuff. But the whole time was trying to figure out how I was going to launch a cannabis company that was really focused and centered on effects-driven, cannabis, which led to Level.
And sorry.
No, go ahead, Jay.
And on that front, I mean, way back when. I mean, it's not like it's thousands of years ago, but way back when you were living near the cannabis farm in Mendocino, like you had the thought that there's hundreds of cannabinoids and small molecules in the plant, and that's compelling. But when did when did sort of the light bulb go off that says, we could do this, and these effects consumers are going to want, right? Or like making the connection between flower and effects people are going to want in form factors that are not flower. Like, talk about a little bit about that journey, because it was relatively new back then.
Yeah, it totally was. And so I tried to launch a cannabis company out of our 400 square foot apartment in San Francisco in like 2013 while working as this chief chemist. I was focused on sublingual sprays. They were 3 milligrams, full spectrum, if you will. Learned a lot about where the industry was at the time and what I would actually need to get a company off the ground, some better resources, some support. And so that really, for the next 2 years, I really just kept watching the industry and seeing where it was going, trying to understand what I need. And then in 2015, myself and my original 2 co-founders, we launched the company with this thesis. We jumped in vapes because vapes were, 2015, they're really getting off the ground. And it was a way we could test this thesis, but also can we operate in this industry? And but the whole time that we were doing that, I never wanted to be in vapes or any other kind of product. I was really focused on, hey, how do we make a product that we could use very expensive at the time cannabinoids that nobody knows anything about and really test them in real time, right? The industry was really our experimental playground. And so tablets, a solid oral dosage form is something where it's easy to manufacture once you figure it out. You can do it very efficiently, and you can get it out to market for people to try. Plus, it was a form factor that wasn't even on the market at the time. So all of those things over those couple years were really where I was, strategizing and trying to figure out how we'd launch into this really effects based paradigm.
Talk a little bit about bringing the tablets first to market. I mean, I've tried the products, and Jay hopefully will soon. But I imagine 2013, 2014, like this is really, really novel, right? Like people were still pretty analog back in those days. I mean, I think PAX was maybe like the highest technology for cannabis consumers then. So talk a little about what it was like bringing that to market, the consumer education piece, the challenges and opportunities associated with that.
Yeah, it's a great question. It took us about a year to really develop our first tablets, which were a sublingual, and they were low dose. They were like 3 milligrams because this was on the eve of Prop 64 coming live in 2018.
Yeah.
So we launched them in 2017, and everyone in California was like, military dads and soccer moms, everyone's going to be consuming cannabis, right? And it was the opposite of really what happened when we rolled into Prop 64. So we launched that, but immediately as we launched that to get it to market, and there were challenges, right? It's very low dose. We had THCV on the market, CBG. Nobody knew what this stuff was, so we were kind of talking way out over our skis for everybody, and so education was a huge challenge for us. But at the same time, we saw the regulations that were going to go live, and we saw that all of a sudden you weren't going to be able to get your Kurova bars anymore or 1,000 milligram cookies.
Right.
It was going to be a 10 milligram cap per dose and 100 milligrams per package, except for orally consumed concentrates. So we got a carve out for tablets as an orally consumed concentrate, and we knew that was our way to capture the high dose market, and we could do it very effectively. Was our thesis, and that's what we ended up proving. So the sublingual was the route into the tablets, but when we saw where regulation was going, we developed the high dose tablet, and essentially we don't have tablingual, this product called the tablingual, our sublingual, in the market anymore because the regulated industry just doesn't support really low dose.
Yeah. And then I guess how did you think, way back when, how did you think about the consumer segments, right? Because there's clear, it's high dose, there's probably pretty clear medical use, but kind of going after the, high tolerance stoners, like that's a totally different market, right? And you have to sort of look at the product in a different way. So how did you think about the consumer segments? And, what have you learned since then?
Yeah, fortunately, I think, we were pretty naive in trying to, these are still customer segments. I think that we're still being delineated at the time, right? There's a bifurcation, an explosion of products, there's regulation, everyone's confused. There's so much traditional stuff going on, especially then, right? I mean, California went from essentially, 4,000 to 5,000 retail operations under Prop 215 to less than 500. Right. And so all of a sudden no one could get cannabis. And so it was pretty confusing at the time. But fortunately, because there were no high dose options on the market, when we started going into retailers, we had very little pushback. We had some initially like, plants over pills, we're not going to take pills. And we're like, yeah, but it's just cannabis. But for the most part, they saw the retailers, and we helped them understand. And we're like, oh, you have an immediate need here. You have high dose consumers that can't be serviced with any other products. And so when we launched the Pro Tab in July of 2018, adoption was pretty quick. And then we could just really build on that momentum. So the initial products were just canonical effects, sativa, hybrid indica. We hadn't put out, THCV, CBN, anything else at that moment. And I think that helped the customer education because there wasn't a lot to explain. It's like you swallow it, you get high, there's an effect to it.
Right. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
And since then, how has that evolved? Because it has evolved even within your portfolio. Like talk a bit about that evolution from that sort of pretty, I don't mean this in any like simple approach to a more robust approach with more presumably educated consumers and more educated people who can sell them.
Yeah. Well, as Ed alluded to, in the early days, we really learned that, us trying to talk about effects-based cannabis outside the canonical effects sativa hybrid indica were just, it was lost on everybody. And we didn't understand messaging. We didn't understand really what we were trying to message. So when we launched the Pro Tab, we had really understood, okay, we need to dial this back. Let's talk, we're trying to speak in sentences and we need to teach the alphabet. So we really went back to, okay, it's sativa hybrid indica. Um, once we got to that point, and then it became, all right, well, I don't know. And supply chain was still developing, right? So THCV was incredibly hard to source. I have a great story about us getting it to market in early 2017. First ones, I think, ever to have THCV on the market. But we realized, hey, we are not quite ready there because there weren't a lot of brands. And we thought a lot of brands would jump into the cannabinoid space a lot earlier, and they didn't. And so we kind of held that down in California for a long time. And so it was like, okay, well, what else could we use? Because we could change effect from the high itself. So then we started dealing with, all right, let's do hash. So we made a hash tab, and the hash tab was very different than a pro tab because, yeah, pro tab uses a distillate, right? So your high, your experience is different. And then, and went that way. So I think as the years went on and people understood and trusted the brand, then as we released the Pro Tab Plus, which was our more emergent cannabinoid, high THCV, high CBN, we have a fully acidic formulation called Recover. Then the industry understood it better. We could message it better. We understood how to control kind of messaging and effects. And at this point, fortunately, you had a lot of other companies, especially edibles, gummies coming out that had a lot, CBN in them, had THCV. So they were really helping, rising tides kind of paradigm. They were helping to educate consumers themselves. And so we just use that to our advantage as well.
Chris, can you talk a little bit about the learning curve with like marketing a novel product in cannabis, right? Because, from what I understand, like there's the sort of chemistry, the engineering challenge of actually making the product, but then there's actually getting that product bought by consumers. Like, talk a little bit about what you've learned about just marketing in cannabis more generally, given A, all the restrictions around marketing cannabis, and B, the general lack of consumer awareness about all these sort of novel form factors.
Yeah, and that's marketing has always been something that's it has been a challenge for us. We are a product first company, and it comes down from the top. Like, I get products. I love product development. I love building. That's where I excel. Marketing is something that we've really had to work with. And in cannabis, most companies are marketing companies that actually have a product that has cannabis in it. We are fully a cannabinoid company, and that's how we identify. So we've had a lot of missteps, I think, potentially in how we've marketed in the past. But the advantage that we had was coming out early in California and having a product that did exactly what it said was going to do. We were able to build a cult following and build off of that. And then within that is just understanding, okay, how do we market this better by staying true to what our core values are, what our tenets of the company are, and kind of what our North Star is of, like, we want to build cannabinoid products that deliver exactly what they're going to say each and every time for consumers. And then we had the ability to do that, and then really have kind of like this organic grassroots movement behind it that really helped us build the company. That's a long way for me to try and answer your question of how we go about marketing, but we really just focus on the key attributes of what the product can offer the consumers, and then it's been experience for us.
I want to ask a question because we focused on sort of the startup and in California, but the brand and the products have expanded beyond that. And I want to talk about that because that is a phase we're seeing now in a lot of brands is moving states or expanding states. We'll see some contraction too, like in fairness. But looking on your site now, right, it's California, Michigan, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Like, how do you think about new markets, and how do you go about either finding partners or setting up operations? Like how do you think about that as the market has grown outside of California?
So our expansion model, you guys fully are aware of the challenges that California has been having for the past several years. And, essentially all growth has been stunted in California for the most part, right? And pretty significant market contraction. So we said, look, we're not gonna release a gummy, a bev, a vape, right? This is our form factor, so we specialize in this, so this is what we're going to do. So the way to grow is to get out of California, and so in 2022 we expanded into Nevada first, kind of our testing ground, right? Because we've got what I'll call an asset light, so we've got mobile facilities that we can take to partners, drop inside a licensed partner. We can manufacture several 100,000 tablets in 5 days and leave it with the partners to fill and finish, and then we can get them to market. So part of our strategy was, hey, we need to see if this is even a viable strategy. And once we did that, then it was like, okay, really identifying partners in other states. Well, identifying states that we think would be a good fit. We really tried to focus on emergent markets, Michigan outside of that, but really look at emergent markets where we think there was good upside. Not a lot of competition, right, for our product class, and then finding partners that understood the product we're making, and I think buy into it, and then are good with kind of our manufacturing paradigm that we were bringing to the table.
Chris, you said something that sort of like struck a chord with me. How do you, as the founder, not chase shiny objects in an industry as quickly moving as cannabis, right? I mean, I'm sure you must have had investors say like, "Oh, why don't you do X, Y, and Z? Like, we're seeing this company sell that." Like, how do you maintain focus, both yourself and your team, and what do you look at to say like, "Oh, this is working," other than just the simple like sales going up?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a fantastic question. It's not easy, right? It's not easy, and I'll tell you, it's hard, right? We operate in a highly regulated consumer product, physical product space,
Right.
and so in this system dynamic, perturbations at this point, you really don't understand until you could be weeks, months, or even years down the road. And I think we've just always approached it of a very long term. Our time horizon. When I founded the company, I said I'm going to build for 10 years and see what I can build in a decade. Right? That's this year. I'm coming up on a decade. So having that time horizon has allowed us to make different decisions when everyone else is like, it's making it rain over here and then it crashes 6 months later, or we're going to go into this product class and that product class. And yeah, it's hard watching other people where you assume, wow, they are being so successful right now and we're getting the crap kicked out of us.
Right.
So it always looks different on the surface than it is. But I think without us just really understanding who we were as a company and the time horizon and what we're trying to do, right? I mean, we are trying to revolutionize the way that people think about and also consume cannabis in our way. We're always going to have the traditional. People are always going to want to inhale it. People love gummies. I mean, you can get gummies in everything these days, right? People are always going to want those form factors, but we're offering something that's completely different. And how do you do that in an industry where no one's ever seen it before or understood it, and then also the long time horizons you have to operate in? So all of those things, I think, have allowed us to be very, very disciplined and very diligent in our approach and how we're going about building something that has a long-term sustainable legacy.
That's a different time horizon than most.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, when we jumped in this industry, right, everyone thought that this was going to be like a tech play. People were going to flip their companies in 18 to 36 months, and it was going to be X, Y, Z. And the reality couldn't be further from the truth. So.
Yeah, we've seen it. We've seen it a lot.
Yeah.
It's and this is the thing. I mean, you say 10 year numbers. Like, I think most people have almost maybe one product life cycle thought in their head. Like that. That's
right.
That's how quickly they're willing to change or enter a market, leave a market, launch a product, end a product, that sort of thing. And it does change the mindset of you as the founder, but also of the business and what success looks like.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this too. I mean, we've been, look, there's zero functioning capital markets. There's zero liquidity in the industry. It's been like this for years and years and years. And we've understood, look, we have a certain amount of cash reserves and runway. And if we don't figure out how to be successful, the company will go away. And that is that's also a very sobering thing to help you understand, like, yeah, I can't just go out and try and chase this shiny object, or that deal sounds amazing, let me go do that, because the opportunity cost for failure is absolute, I think, in this
Right.
industry in a lot of ways, and you can't recover from it. So that is something that definitely keeps me up and has kept me up at night for years.
For a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You'll
pretty
get
much.
sleep. The next decade is for sleep.
Yeah.
Chris, we're coming up on time here. What's next for Level? Like what's exciting over the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years? Like what are you? We could talk about what's keeping you up at night. What's getting you awake in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, last year we essentially opened 5 states last year. We relaunched New York, and then we launched Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. We and naively, the physical side of it, the launching part was easy. I'll say easy. I mean, it took years to get through contracts and get everything, get products made, get it to market. But I think understanding what those markets are and how we're going to be successful in them has been a little bit of a challenge for us. So I'm excited to see over the next year. Now that we're in the States, we're understanding these different markets outside of California, really, how we really drive growth there. So that's very exciting. And then it's another aspect is we just very recently launched our hemp DTC platform. It's levelexperience.shop. And we get to focus on the core thesis of what the company was founded on. And that wasn't to get people high. That was to use cannabinoids for people to use in their lives that could have a very positive impact on their health in whatever way, whether they were using it for relaxation or if they're using it for palliative care because they're going through, chemotherapy or some type of oncology treatment. And, we run a really lean team and we've wanted to do this for a very long time. And we have finally gotten around to it. So that the hemp side of the business, and when I say hemp, I'm really not talking about D9. I'm talking about acidic cannabinoids. I'm talking about non-psychoactive that are done in formulations that really people can use and get to use every day in their life. They have a reliable intervention, if you will, that they use in their life somehow every day. And that's something I'm very excited about for the next 1 to 3 years.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate learning about you, learning about Level, learning about the current day, the road that got here, and what the future holds as well, and what, as Jeremy said, both keeps you up at night, but also what gets you up in the morning. So we appreciate the time, Chris, and we'll connect with you again soon. Thank you again, Chris, for joining us to record earlier this week. Thank you, all of us, for joining us here today. Thank you, Lit Alerts, for your partnership and exclusive insights, specifically this week into the New York market. And especially thank you, Dutchie, for making this show possible each and every week. You can find all of these stories and much, much more on cultivated.news. We also love if you follow us on LinkedIn. Find us on YouTube to stay connected with us on socials. Check back next Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, right here for This Week in Cannabis News, powered by Dutchie. Have a good and safe weekend.